The early January 2026 rendition of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro wasn't only carried out for legal reasons. Yes, there was an open indictment for Nicolás Maduro in American courts because he was labeled a narco-terrorist. Yes, there were many months of buildup along the coast of Venezuela, both militarily and diplomatically, in order to anticipate and prepare for the ultimate rendition of Maduro. But even though he was captured by CIA and American Special Forces and was sent to a prison to await trial, there is still what's known as a secondary benefit, a quiet, hidden benefit that not many people are talking about and very few understand, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to talk to you about how President Donald Trump plans to use Venezuela to save the US economy. Unless you've been hiding under a rock for the last few weeks, then you've heard multiple times over now that Venezuela has the single largest oil reserve anywhere in the planet. Number one largest, 303 billion barrels of oil, which actually puts it about 15% larger than Saudi Arabia, which is the second largest oil platform, bigger than Canada and bigger than Iran, the top 4 largest oil repositories in the world. Venezuela is at the top of that list. So it's no surprise that Venezuela has natural crude, heavy crude oil as a natural resource. And there is a benefit to that crude oil. But what's talked about even less and rarely understood is that Venezuela also has one of the largest critical mineral reserves in all of the Western Hemisphere, the largest gold reserves in all of Latin America, plus a historically long-standing relationship with the United States prior to the Chavez regime. Donald Trump understands this. His administration understands this, and they are using the rendition of Nicolás Maduro as a springboard to rebuild the US economy because of these very unique elements that are only present in Venezuela. In economic terms, Venezuela is a country labeled as vast geological wealth, meaning the geology of the country is core to its wealth. Yes, that means its oil reserves are important, but it also means its natural gas reserves are important, its critical mineral reserves are important, and its gold reserves are important. Venezuela is a cornucopia of highly valuable natural resources, all conveniently located just across the Gulf from the United States. Let's get really specific about how big these reserves are. Yes, it has the largest oil reserves in the world. We've already covered that. It actually has the second largest natural gas reserves in all of the American continents. It also has the largest gold reserves in all of Latin America. And lastly, its critical minerals, specifically its rare earth critical minerals, are some of the largest in the Western Hemisphere. So within just these 4 areas, you can start to see how what America needs the most, rare earth minerals, critical minerals, oil, gold, these elements are all present in Venezuela. And conveniently enough, 150 American warships are parked off the coast of Venezuela, making it the safest it's been in the last 30 years for American business enterprise to enter into Venezuela. Let's dig deeper into the crude oil reserves that exist in Venezuela alone. So yes, it's a large deposit of oil. But just having oil isn't enough. You have to be able to actually refine that oil into something useful. Gasoline, diesel, petroleum products. Venezuela on its own doesn't have much of a refining capability. It doesn't even have much of a drilling capability. In fact, the single country in the world with the most oil refineries is actually, drumroll please, the United States. The United States has the most oil refining capacity anywhere in the world. We outpace China, we outpace Iran, we outpace Russia, we outpace Saudi Arabia. The United States oil production industry was actually built on the promise of having access to Venezuelan oil. So the exact type of heavy crude oil that's in the repositories around Venezuela is the exact type of crude oil that US refineries were built to handle. The two countries were always meant to work together. And the United States wants to be a state that refines the oil rather than a state that drills the oil, specifically because when you control the final product, you control the pricing, the market share, and the distribution of that final product. The United States doesn't want to have that natural resource itself. It wants to pull that natural resource from a neighboring country, and Venezuela is the perfect option. So in the very near future, you can expect that American corporations, American oil industry, is going to start pulling natural resources out of the ground in Venezuela so that it can be refined across Texas and Arkansas in the United States. And then the US will have a major stake in controlling the price distribution and flow of crude oil, refined oil, gasoline, and petroleum products, all of which are precursors to military, defense, and industrial use all over the world. A second important area that the United States is interested in is in the critical minerals that exist inside of Venezuela. Two of those critical minerals include iron ore and something called bauxite. Now, iron ore is something that's available all over the world, but it's largely refined in China. The United States has its own iron ore capability, and it can develop its own iron internally using internal mines and internal manufacturers. So let's put iron aside for just a second, because Venezuela only helps our existing iron capability. Whereas when you consider Venezuela as a location for something called bauxite, Venezuela stands alone. Bauxite is actually the precursor for aluminum. So all the aluminum that you see in the world around you doesn't come from aluminum ore. It actually comes from bauxite ore that's refined into aluminum. So whether you're talking about aluminum foil or aluminum cans or the aluminum that's used in stealth fighter jets, it all comes from a mineral called bauxite. The United States has no meaningful reserve of bauxite inside its own territory. The largest bauxite reserves in all of the Western Hemisphere actually exist in Venezuela. And those bauxite reserves are underutilized, just like most natural resources in Venezuela. So the United States has become uncomfortably reliant on Chinese bauxite and Australian bauxite that's actually refined in China in order to maintain our aluminum demand, not just for our consumer demand, but also for our military, industrial, and technological use. So the aluminum that you and I use every day, almost 100% of it comes through China, which is why China has started to use export controls as a way to punish the United States for tariffs. And one of those big festering risks is the risk tied to aluminum and bauxite. So Donald Trump is looking at Venezuela, seeing these untapped bauxite reserves, and knows that the United States could have all of the aluminum it could ever need for military, national security, industrial, modernization, technological needs just in the next continent south of us in South America. And any logistics that are built to ship Venezuelan oil to the United States could also be used to ship Venezuelan bauxite to the United States. So now the United States would have access to very inexpensive oil and nearly unlimited bauxite, which would be required for us to continue to build our military and build our technological infrastructure into the future, not just a few years, but multiple generations. Now you're starting to see the picture of how Donald Trump is looking at Venezuela. He's not just looking at it as a narco-trafficking terrorist state. He's not just looking at it as an ally to Russia, China, and Iran. He's not just seeing it as a pain in the ass. He's actually seeing it as a possibility for incredible potential in the future, long after Donald Trump steps down from office. The third critical resource that you have to consider when you look at Venezuela is gold. Venezuela has the largest gold deposits in all of Latin America. Latin America includes Central America and South America. So that means in all of the Western Hemisphere, the gold really exists in the United States and Venezuela. And as of right now, with the rendering of President Maduro, Donald Trump has more power and more control in Venezuela than any president before him reaching back into the 1980s. It would be impossible to consider the opportunity of Venezuela without considering the opportunity of Venezuelan gold to boost not just the US economy, but also long-term sovereign wealth for the United States. So let's recap what we know right now. We know that Venezuelan oil is going to benefit the United States. We know that Venezuelan bauxite is going to benefit the United States. We know that Venezuelan gold is going to benefit the United States. So with these three resources alone, the United States has essentially tripled its amount of financial benefit from the rendition of one corrupt world leader. But let's actually dig into how these three resources are going to significantly benefit the economic status of you, me, our children, and our children's children. First, we have to consider critical mineral independence. This is something that presidents have been working on all the way back to Obama, trying to find a way to decouple the United States from a reliance on critical minerals that actually come from our worst geopolitical enemies, China, Russia, and Iran. Almost all rare earth and critical minerals around the world are refined primarily in China. China controls 40 to 60% of all global critical earth minerals. That is an incredible amount of control for one communist country that stands diametrically opposed to the values of the United States. Critical mineral independence would not only mean the United States would have increased national security, because we'd be able to build our own military and industrial needs on our own at our own pace, but it also means that we would be less reliant and less vulnerable to the manipulation of those critical minerals by foreign countries. The way that China tries to manipulate critical minerals going to the United States is not just through boycotts and blockades. They also try to manipulate the price, the quality, and the amount available on the marketplace. So you can see how China has asymmetrical control because it's the source of refinement of critical earth minerals, just like the United States wants to gain control in the oil industry by being the source for refinement of oil. Because when you control the final product, you control pricing, distribution, and trade. That's exactly what China has been abusing in terms of critical minerals coming to the United States, which is not only a win for you and me security-wise, but also a win for us economically because of the second point that Donald Trump realizes. Any product the US creates is a product that will be sold in US dollars. So as the world tries to find a way to reduce its dependency on the US dollar, the US gains the opportunity to leverage back some of that demand for US dollars by creating more oil that's coming from Venezuela. So we might purchase Venezuelan oil in Venezuelan currency, something that benefits the US dollar because it's stronger than Venezuelan currency. But when that oil comes across to the United States and is refined into a final product, now everything is sold in US dollars. That means that more foreign countries will need to purchase US dollars in order to buy the US resource. As they purchase more US dollars, the value for your dollar and mine goes up, the opposite of inflation. We see an increase in the value of our dollars, and you and I don't have to change anything. It's just a matter of Donald Trump gaining access to Venezuelan oil, refining that oil, and selling that oil. It increases the overall GDP of the United States because we are refining a natural resource and selling the refined final product. Thirdly, it makes it so that your US dollar and mine actually buy more of those resources at a lower price inside our own country because you and I already have US dollars in our bank account, in our pocket, on our credit card. So we actually get to buy more with less dollars because the price is going down for us as the US has more of a role in everything related to oil. That means, yes, your gas prices will go down, but it also means that your heating and your energy costs will go down. It also means that the money you have in the stock market will increase because demand in the stock market will grow with the energy sector. And it means that anything that you use that's derived from petroleum, whether that's petroleum jelly or whether that's plastics that you use to carry your leftover food, all of it is going to become that much more accessible. Plus, our dollar value will increase, which will reduce inflation and get us back to a place where the US dollar is not only dominant in the whole world, but definitely something that you and I feel safer with here in our own country. So you can understand how critical mineral independence is important, and you can certainly understand how increasing the value of the dollar is important. But the third point about natural resources in Venezuela is the one that's going to absolutely transform our economy, and that is tied to gold. Whoever controls Venezuelan gold will control gold over the Western Hemisphere of the planet. And if you control half the gold on the planet, you can essentially counterbalance any manipulation that happens to gold everywhere else on the planet. Gold is the single precious metal that is being used for national reserves in all of the wealthiest countries in the world. Gold is the #1 precious metal being used to safeguard against financial collapse not only by national banks and centralized banks, but by government institutions and individual wealthy people all over the world. The only way gold suffers is if there's an abundance of gold on the market. Now, that is something that our competitors in China or Russia could have manipulated in the past that would have hurt the United States significantly. But now that the United States controls Venezuelan gold, we have a natural hedge against any manipulation that might come from our enemies. One of the reasons you haven't seen anyone attack gold yet is because gold is used worldwide. Gold is a precious metal that nobody wants to manipulate. Everybody wants to see gold increase in value because that is the precious metal that all bank and national reserves are being maintained in all around the globe, whether it's Russia, Canada, the UK, or Switzerland. That means gold remains a priority, especially for United States national security and national wealth building. Our own gold reserves are something we take very seriously, and having access to Venezuelan gold means that we'll be able to control, manage, hedge, and increase American wealth through the exploitation of Venezuelan gold. And how are we going to exploit that gold? We're only going to create and mine enough gold that maintains a very high per ounce price of gold, because as the price per ounce of gold increases, so does the national wealth of the United States. So anybody out there who's afraid that Venezuelan gold is going to flood the market is missing the most important point. Donald Trump doesn't want to reduce the price per ounce of gold. He wants to maintain and increase the price per ounce of gold. He's essentially taking Venezuelan gold and putting it on a shelf, understanding that while it's not available to the market, the overall price of gold and value of gold continues to increase. And if there's ever a point in the future of the United States where the United States wants more gold reserves, we can literally mine and refine the gold ourselves and use it to boost our own national sovereign wealth, which also boosts the wealth of every individual who owns gold. This is one of the critical differences between currency, like the US dollar, and precious metals like gold. Currency is meant to be manipulated. It's meant to inflate and deflate. It's meant to be flexible. It's a tool for central banks so that they can constantly help correct the economy. Precious metals are not the same kind of tool. They're actually a tool that's designed to preserve and protect wealth against the changes in inflation and deflation. That's why, as you've seen the US dollar value go down, you've seen the price per ounce of gold go up. That's also why, in times of economic confidence, you see the price of gold maintain or increase slowly. Gold doesn't often decline, and the reason it doesn't decline is because it's a safe haven for wealth. That means wealthy institutions, wealthy organizations, wealthy individuals put their money, their currency, into gold because they know that over time, gold only gets more valuable. One of the big reasons why gold gets more valuable over time is because countries themselves save national wealth in the form of gold. So if you're an individual, you want to save your money, build your wealth, the same way the country that you live in builds their wealth and saves their money. So gold is a one-for-one match. There's a reason the United States doesn't have a savings account where it saves money in US dollars. A big part of this is the fact that gold is a limited physical resource, which makes it very different from cryptocurrency or from actual physical fiat currency. Fiat currency can be printed. Cryptocurrencies are constantly being invented over and over again, but gold is actually limited only to gold deposits currently in existence all over the world. Some of those have been identified, some of those have not. But places like Venezuela that have the largest known deposit in Latin America are in high demand, because if you control that gold, you essentially have a giant savings account that you just tapped into. If you've been keeping up with the current economic crisis in the United States, then you understand that wealthy Americans are essentially turning to two different wealth building strategies. There's a crypto strategy and a gold strategy. The crypto strategy is essentially based in the high volatility of cryptocurrency, meaning we know that cryptocurrency will have very good days where it increases 50, 100, 200%, but it will also have very bad days where it crashes 50, 100, 200%. That volatility works if you have a high tolerance for risk and if you have an abundance of fiat currency. So that's why very wealthy individuals, very wealthy companies, wealthy institutions are able to put money into cryptocurrency and risk losing it, because they might lose 50% one day but gain 75% the next day. The average retail American doesn't have that kind of risk that they can take. They don't have that much fiat currency that they can put in. They can't handle losing 50% of their portfolio in a day. Not only do you see the wealthy investing in cryptocurrency, you also see them investing in gold. In fact, you see them using their wins from cryptocurrency as their primary tool to invest in gold, because they understand that over time gold will be stable and increase in value. So it's a much lower threshold for risk, even if it is a much higher dollar value per investment. That's why you can buy cryptocurrencies for pennies, but you can't buy an ounce of gold for anything less than $4,000 right now. So while the wealthy continue to use cryptocurrency to take big risks and increase their wealth, and then use gold to protect their wealth, the average everyday American doesn't really want to get involved in crypto. It's too high risk, it's too volatile, and simply put, we don't have enough money to take a big loss in cryptocurrency. So that leaves many Americans thinking their only option is to save their money in cash. Cash is something that we know can be manipulated. Cash was intended to be manipulated. So in fact, what Americans should be doing is taking their cash and acting like the central bank, acting like the federal government, acting like systematically wealthy people. Americans should be taking their cash and converting it into gold, because every wealthy person, institution, and country in the world is trying to increase the value per ounce of gold. So if you put your money into gold, you actually increase your overall wealth. Where if you hold your money in cash, you run the risk of letting the market reduce the value of your cash to correct the economy overall. I'm not saying to put all your money in gold. I'm not even saying that you have to put your money in gold. I'm just saying that when you look at the math between cash, crypto, and gold, gold is the clear winner both in terms of longevity and reliability. That's why national banks use it. That's why central governments use it. That's why the wealthy and wealthy institutions use it. That's why you should use it too. So the question is not whether or not to buy gold. The question becomes, where do you buy gold that's reputable? And this is the problem with our current marketplace. There are so many fraudulent brokers out there. As gold is increased in demand for the wealthy and affluent, you have seen phony brokers also increase, trying to take advantage of the wealthy and the affluent buyer. As they've been targeting the wealthy, however, they've also been abusing the everyday person, because it makes it very difficult for people to understand what gold is reputable and what gold is not reputable. You can Google this and research this to death, and all you'll do is find yourself going in circles, never really knowing who is real and who is not, which is why I want to encourage you to look up the single gold broker that my clients and I all use, and that gold broker is called Genesis Gold Group. Genesis Gold Group has international recognition and a global reputation for being one of the best gold brokers in the world. Genesis Gold Group has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and 4.5 stars on Trustpilot. It's the go-to gold broker for many wealthy Americans, including my clients, because it's based in conservative values and the Christian faith. I trust Genesis Gold Groups, my clients trust them, and you have a chance to learn from their best-in-class knowledge and service if you visit edsgold.com today, or just click on the top link in the description below. The US is taking unprecedented action in order to rebuild and save the US economy. And even while the rest of the world decides whether to condemn or celebrate the capture of Nicolás Maduro, what you're seeing and I'm seeing is that Venezuela will be key to the long-term survival of the US economy. Their gold, their critical minerals, their oil will become the foundation that benefits the United States not just for the next few decades, but for the next few generations. I want you to have the same opportunities that our federal government sees in Venezuela, and that opportunity lies first and foremost in gold. So visit edsgold.com, click on that first link in the description below, research Genesis Gold Group for yourself, and learn how gold will not only safeguard your immediate future, but will protect your legacy for multiple generations ahead.